Now, integration propaganda, on the other hand, is something else. Once agitation propaganda has done its job, then people have to go back to work. So uh, the war, if there was one, is over, and agitation propaganda has got you through it, and now you gotta keep on going, right? So people are excited. They've been excited. There's been a party, and the party may have been 2-3 years long. But if they won, if people won, if your side won, the luster still is going to fade, because you cannot keep this sense of excitement forever and ever. It's like being in love. The difference between, I suppose, being in a very new relationship, um, in the honeymoon phase of a relationship. It's interesting that we use that. There's this phase of a relationship where the partner or the loved one can't do anything wrong. Everything they do is wonderful and so on. And then after a while, you're like, except for this, which drives me nuts, it's this and that. Yeah, and you start to see sort of the day-to-day grind stuff. You're like, okay, now it's going to take work. Now we have to work at this relationship. Well, the same kind of thing is true, let's say, after a war, where you're like, now we have to work at the peace. And working at the peace is going to be a lot less exciting than working at the war. Now, most of the time, people are like, yay, that's great, terrific, we love peace, which they do until they get bored. But the daily grind comes on. So the question that was faced by charismatic leaders, and by charismatic leaders, I mean revolutionary leaders, which would include, say, the American founding fathers, who were revolutionary leaders and charismatics, but also Lenin, Mao, because I talked about Mao's Little Red Book, Fidel Castro, JFK was a charismatic leader, Malcolm X, is what do you do when the fever subsides? Because then people have to be kept in line, and they have to go on working at the thing. They have to go on working at the job you've given them, which is, to say, bring about justice, or bring about, after the revolution is over, now what? Well, now they've got lousy jobs. They still had. I mean, if they're a farmer, they're still a farmer, probably. And they have to do what they're told. They're going to make it work. And that's a lot less, oh boy, yeah, than being in the middle of a revolution. The answer to this is integration propaganda. Integration propaganda integrates people into the web of the agreement that was made during these exciting times. Integration propaganda makes us stay in place. It keeps us feeling like what we're doing has a purpose, that we are engaged in an overall bigger plan. We're not just, a delivery person. You're a delivery person for the republic. You are engaged in the bigger work of building a republic. So if you're this is like a mail carrier, mail carriers, like, how is that an honorable job? It's like, it's an honorable job because you're carrying information between people and you're building the republic. And so the mail is very, very important. It's like, right, yeah, okay. So you can see that. But at the same time, you say to somebody in the morning, mail is very important. They're like, yeah, like, look, I've got to get out there and walk around in the cold for 7 hours, freezing my butt and fingers off. And it's hard for me to see the romance of it all. It's like, that's why you need to believe that what we're doing here, Charlie or Susan, is so important. That we have to convince people that there's going to be heavy lifting to do, that what you are doing is worthwhile. And for that, we may need to, for instance, use advertising, because we may need to go on persuading people that what they're doing is valuable and it's necessary, in fact. And so in the case of a consumer culture like ours, advertising, it cannot be done away with. We have to go on consuming. If capitalism is going to go running the way it is, it's built on production and consumption. And if there's no consumption, then why are you producing anything else? Which is what happens when we hit a slowdown like this one. You're like, oh, and you see people who you think, well, that job is secure, until the production line slows down and the pipe begins to empty out. You're like, whoa, hold on a second. I didn't realize this was all connected. Well, we've been here before. This is what the Depression, if nothing else, what the Depression showed us. This is the Depression, the worldwide depression between 1929, the crash of 29, and then the beginning of World War II in 1939, showed us is that when everybody is depressed, everybody's depressed, and very, very few people do well, except the people who have enormous amounts of wealth, who can afford to buy things. And if you can afford to buy things when prices are depressed, then you can own the world. Okay, that's another whole discussion. So integration propaganda basically is what makes you believe that this is your system because you are integrated into it. You are brought into the system. You are brought into the belief that, yes, indeed, this is the way things should be. And you have a crucial part of it. And your part of it tends to be a little bit on the small side, but still, even though you're delivering, say, milk, or you're working for FedEx, or you have some small little tiny minuscule portion of the economy, I suppose, and the social web in your grasp, still you're a crucial piece of the network. And if you think about this as a net, kind of net that you would go fishing with, you can't afford to have a hole in the net. There can't be any holes in the net. If you're going to collect fish, you have to have, everybody has to work together. And that is integration propaganda. So you use integration propaganda to work people into their system. You make a daily sacrifice because your sacrifice will benefit everybody, if nobody else, the next generation, which will have what you didn't have. That's integration propaganda. Okay. Okay, I was going to stop there, but I have 2 more slides. Okay, let me get this out of the way here. Let me see if I can help. Oh yeah, okay, this will maybe help you. Okay, so here, woo, that's small. So, okay, so here's a little from propaganda. He says, the more the technique, oh, you go ahead, take this down. Oh, okay, I'm unpaused. The more the techniques of distributing information develop, the more individuals shaped by such information. Okay, right. It is not true that he, because here is the mid-century sociologist saying he for everybody, can choose freely with regard to what is presented to him as the truth. In other words, when you look at all the news sources you have to look at on a given day, are you getting the truth? Absolutely not. But we have been told that because we have access to so much information, and because, believe it or not, the Fox News motto, right, is fair and balanced. fair and balanced if you're on the hard right wing. It's like, okay, fair enough, so to speak, fair enough. So if you think, well, I get my news from, a fair and balanced source, it's like, according to who? Are the people who are writing your news, are they people of color? Are they people of color from, say, for instance, Africa? Where in Africa? What country in Africa? Are they from Europe? Where in Europe? Are they from Northern Europe? Are they poor? Are they immigrants? Who exactly is doing the writing? Who is doing the reporting? What stories got to the front page of the web, front of the web, basically, on your phone that day? So let's say you're like, well, I've read the Guardian and the New York Times and the Washington Post, and I've read the Global Mail, and I've looked at the CBC. You're just beginning your day with the news. Have you looked at the French news? Have you looked at All Africa? Are you looking at news aggregators from, say, the Horn of Africa? Do you know what's going on in South Africa today? What about in China? Where are you getting your news about China, by the way? What about the Middle East? Did you get the Middle East from the Middle Eastern news from Al Jazeera, which is an interesting way to get it? And just because white people didn't set up Al Jazeera doesn't mean that it's bad or wrong. It means it's not us, right? If you're a white guy like me, it's like, well, they don't look like me, so it's not me. Okay, so did you choose freely with regard to what you saw today? Probably not. You probably chose what you've been trained to choose, by family, by us and faculty, by your friends, and so on and so on. Okay. All right. Let me unsmall myself again here. Oh, geez. I'll just move myself over here. Jeez. Okay. Here we go. I'll let you take this down. if you wish. Okay, so once a force, nation state organization uses propaganda, all of the different parts. Okay, so this is the same old business about any weapon. When you begin to use one weapon, you probably can't afford to be to not be using the weapon against your enemy. So if your enemy rolls out planes, you better have planes. Remember, I was talking about equal footing of war. You know, what is proportionate response? So your enemy attacks you with tanks, and you come after them with planes and bombers and tanks and submarines and nuclear weapons, and you eliminate them. It's like not a proportionate response. By the same token, if you come at somebody with information warfare and you're not prepared for it, and you're not prepared to engage in information warfare, there's going to be a problem. Just as one must advertise about it as sellers are advertising, the state will not be able to avoid using propaganda. So what Ellul saw here was a systemic problem. It was a problem that was created by states, effectively, not by, well, and by the people who are in them, duh, right? The most at risk from propaganda are those convinced they have nothing to fear from it. And the people who are convinced that they know exactly where they got their ideas, they know what that they mean, they own every single one of their ideas, they haven't been persuaded, they haven't been coerced, they haven't in any way been, they arrived at their ideas because they're free-thinking individuals, and no, all that stuff you're going to hear. These are the people who are probably the most at risk because they're not on their guard, partly. And partly because, well, there's a bunch of reasons. I mean, there's a sort of mindset that goes along with this, which is that I'm okay, Jack. And that's kind of the best way of putting it, I think, at this point. Okay, so that's enough for this point 3.